report's ready. A 5-MeO DMT trip report, posted to earwid.org by DJ for Funsies on November 30th, 2011. I feel it should be stated that I'm on 10 mg a day of sertraline hydrochloride, a common SSRI. However, I don't feel that it affected my experience at all. This will be the most comprehensive and detailed recollection my brain can produce to me. Friends have asked how I could remember so much when they couldn't, and to be honest, I couldn't answer them. I, personally, feel it is because of my natural photographic memory and obsessiveness and preparedness that I was prepared to take it all in. This is my first ever written report for any of my drug experiences. I'm feeling compelled to write it after the experience I recently, last night, had with 5-MeO DMT. As does everyone who does DMT, I consider myself an experienced tripper with many LSD, psilocybin, amanita, salvia, DXM, MDMA, MDA, and many combinations of all of them together. This experience, however, was a greater experience than any feeling I had ever had come over me during the highest peak or sharpest part of any trip before, or even greater than any body load I've ever felt from amphetamines. I recently grew incredibly curious about DMT, and especially 5-MeO DMT, as it seemed to have a far greater enlightening effect to it. And this was exactly what I've always been looking for in a psychedelic drug. I've always wanted to take something from a trip, or I've learned something new during the experience and have yet to truly have it happen. Over 3 days, I read damn near every single one of the DMT and 5-MeO vault reports here at Earwid, and was enthralled by what the drug seemed to do. Enlighten. It was after I read a specific report that I decided this would be the last psychedelic I will use, and even now, the next day, I still feel the same. As soon as I knew of a very close friend who had some, I immediately met up with him and explained to him my feelings. Being as good of a friend as he is, he gladly obliged me, and we left the party we were at and proceeded to his apartment. Once there, we turned off all the lights but his one tri-light. It had a green, yellow and red light on it, and put on his stereo at a mildly audible level. I put a Tempur-Pedic mattress topper up against the wall, and sat down upon it and picked Radiohead's Nude as my trip song. It proved useless though, as I'll explain. The DMT my friend had procured was a very light, fluffy white powder, a crystalline material that immediately disappeared as soon as it touched skin, and tingled wherever it touched. It was inside of the quick dissolved gel caps and was sticking to the plastic. He told me that each one was supposed to be 1 dose, and each one was $10, so I assumed it to be 10 milligrams. We put just barely enough cannabis in the bottom of his glass hand bowl to form a cover over the hole. We gingerly took off the top of the gel cap, which proved difficult as it disturbed the shards at the bottom greatly. We then dumped it right into the bowl, and it poured to cover the whole thing. I laid back on the mattress and pressed play and held the bowl to my lips. I held the lighter over it so it all melted down into a blackish, may have just looked black due to the lack of light and or shadow, goop over it. I then lit almost the entire bowl in one hit, and pulled as hard as I could, trying immensely to avoid pulling my adventure onto my teeth. I immediately tasted the metallic and unnatural. It was very hard to hold in, as I lit some resin and it was hurting my lungs. As soon as the smoke hit my lungs, the brick wall I was facing immediately started rippling, as if it was the surface of a body of water. It was rippling all along with Tom York of Radiohead's voice, as he hummed it was changing how fast the ripples went. I exhaled the first hit, and I saw the smoke flow right out of my mouth and straight out to the brick wall in front of me, and into a black hole in the wall I hadn't noticed before. In the brief second between my hits, which felt like a whole experience in itself, I closed my eyes and felt every feeling I had inside of my brain that I had ever felt come into me. It would start in my big toe and little toe on each foot, and then I felt each feeling spread into each of my toes individually, and they immediately flew up into my body. At first I was able to keep up and identify them and enjoy them separately, but suddenly they sped up, and I was unable to interpret it, and I just felt as though my body was full of every feeling I could think of. I even started to feel some of my negative aspects coming in, such as anxiety and panic. but once I did, I smiled, and they were immediately flushed away with happiness. I opened my eyes, and my friend held the bowl to my mouth for me to hit it a second time, but I was barely able to. I fell forward when I tried, and he helped me make sure to get the hit. As I was holding in the smoke, I was watching the whole room start to spin clockwise around the hole my hit blew into. I was watching the light flow from the different light bulbs, and each stream went and expanded incredibly fast, but I was able to see all of them at all times. They were bouncing off of the walls and into and out of each other, making different colours pulse in front of me. I'd forgotten about the hit in my lungs. I breathed it out and watched as the smoke pulled the entire room into the black hole in the wall. The lamp got pulled into the hole before the flowing light did. After the lamp got sucked in, the walls were gone, and the radio was still circling. I could see Tom New York's voice as a colour in the vortex, and it got sucked in moments before the radio did. I got very confused when all that was left in the room was the colour, because it was moving fast enough to avoid the hole. However, I don't know whether I closed my eyes or the hole got powerful enough to suck in the light, but suddenly I was just watching patterns flow in front of me. They were all very intricate, and every time I began to understand what one was, it would change, causing me a lot of frustration. I felt cheated. They were just layers of the patterns from the top of my vision to the bottom, each layer different and constantly changing, and I felt incredibly overwhelmed and minuscule, and was longing to be able to be a part of it and understand them fully. It was what I had been wanting all along. At that point, either I actually opened my physical eyes, or my consciousness opened its eyes. But what happened next, I was seeing with truly open eyes, whether they be spiritual or physical. Also, as this gets described, it all sounds very slow moving, but I assure you, it felt as though it was all happening incredibly quickly, and my brain was struggling to keep up with all of these sensations and sights, and in retrospect, can be examined much deeper than during the experience. I opened my eyes to see triangles flying around an almost completely domed room. It was what being inside of a perfectly rounded igloo is like. When I opened my eyes, I saw the last triangle go into place. However, these were not regular triangles. Among their 3 equilateral sides, they had a sort of extra dimension to them. Not just a dimension as in depth, but as if they were in more than one dimension at the same time. They were all constantly shifting, and what colour they were was shifting as well, but there was never a hole. I was wondering in complete awe how they were able to do it. As I was beginning to explore the room I was in and develop questions, I began to hear a voice. This wasn't just any voice, however. It was my girlfriend's. It was my girlfriend of 4 years, whom I have no question will be my wife for the rest of my life. The minute I heard her voice, the feeling in my toes came back as I was looking around. This time it was an extreme amount of love flowing through me, and I wanted to cry but couldn't at the time. She said a single word to me, "Smile," in a very sweet voice, and so I did immediately. While smiling, I noticed that every triangle I smiled at turned a darker green. I don't know and couldn't figure out then what it was doing to the triangle, but it turned a darker green and became much more single-dimensional, as if I was merely in a room now. I felt better and better as I did this, so I continued through all of them, and soon the whole place was a dark green room that I felt very much a part of, and could suddenly sense something or some people outside of it. It wasn't like I could see silhouettes or anything, I merely was feeling these intense presences outside of the room that were all impressing themselves upon me independently, and at the same time. I couldn't see them or hear them in any way, but I could feel the immense amount of energy on the other side of the room, as if I was in an egg waiting to open. I could feel my girlfriend's presence again, and discern that hers was one of the presences outside. I felt a great yearning grow in me to get out there, and I felt a shift in the energy outside of the room. It was as if they felt or took notice of my desire and love, and turned their attention to me. I felt the presences examining me both inside and out. My gaze drifted to my chest, and I could feel their presence like spotlights on me, and inside of my brain. They were looking through the information inside my brain, as if checking for something or checking the preparedness. As they would examine an experience, I would feel it as well, as if they were replaying it inside of me. Several of the things they looked through involved my girlfriend and I and drug experiences we had together, such as our LSD, mushrooms, MDMA, and just sober adventures we had together as well. They seemed to be measuring how much I loved her in all of these situations, and in different meaningful moments we had together. Then, I felt a wave of relief flow over my body, as if they were lessening their gaze into me. Immediately after this, I felt the strongest impression in my girlfriend's presence again. Her energy and consciousness were just on the outside of the room. I could feel it, and she was with the others as well. They seemed more and more familiar, as suddenly the experience began to slow down immensely. I felt as though I had been there for hours, and suddenly my girlfriend's voice made its last appearance, with her taunting and awe-inspiring. "You're almost ready." However, it was a very soft yaw, and the almost had such an angst, and imagine the feeling right before you sneeze, but then don't. The word had that feeling behind it, causing my body to feel the magnitude of how close I was to being ready to meet them, and be with them again, and followed by a very confident sounding ready. At this point in time, my experience was completely slowed down. I was just wondering what I should be doing, and suddenly, I heard my friend's girlfriend say the words, "Look how big his smile is." And when I turned my head over there, the egg finally broke, but to my immediate dismay, it was to a reality that I knew far too well. Once I was back in the apartment, I just closed my eyes to try and relish the remaining closed-eye visuals I was getting from the drug, and enjoy the remaining body rush that lasted. The swirls of patterns just felt as though I'd eaten a large amount of mushrooms, and the body rush was akin to a small dose of MDA. After mine and my friend's experiences that night, there was always another hit left in the bowl that was used to just keep the afterglow going for a small time longer. I then noticed it was quite late. I stayed with my friend at his apartment until I'd reached my baseline, and then headed home to sleep. But I had a less than resting sleep, and I've been sort of in a fog today. Overall, I am very happy with the experience, and it was exactly what I was wanting from a 5-MeO DMT trip. I wanted to experience something that was a totally foreign reality, and to be able to take something away from the experience. Though I experienced the first of those two objectives, it is my understanding that the latter is obtained once one breaks through the chrysanthemum, or my green triangle dimension dome room. I chalk this up to me not being able to keep a hold of reality long enough to get the third good toke. I do wish I'd been able to get the third one, and been able to accomplish my mission in one experience. But alas, now I have a reason to do it again. I really enjoyed reading this 5-MeO report because it contrasts with a lot of the other 5-MeO experiences that I like to feature, which are mostly breakthrough, super transcendent trips. But this one was a sub-breakthrough and seemed to exhibit more visual hallucinations, which sometimes I've read a lot of people's reports from 5-MeO. I've not experienced it myself, so it probably is relative, different for everybody, that they don't really have like traditional psychedelic visuals of crazy kaleidoscopic features and mad colours and sort of entities, etc. The hallucinatory aspects of psychedelics. It always just seems to be like pure consciousness, and maybe that's a difference between a breakthrough and a non-breakthrough of 5-MeO. Maybe the breakthrough is just like pure sort of God consciousness, and before that it's more similar to other tryptamine headspaces. Yeah, it still means you can take a lot away from it though. Experiencing an altered state like this, going from this guy said he had experiences with other psychedelics, and obviously this was his most profound one that so far. Doesn't mean you have to have a transcendent mystical experience every time you do these things. Like, there's value in all these altered states, and especially if you can go in it with an intention. I think the best thing for him was sort of knowing that there's something beyond this experience that he had, knowing that there's possibility for the rabbit hole to go even deeper. It's not just about, say, tripping out or having an altered state. It's about literally dialing your consciousness to fucking like beyond human capabilities. which is definitely possible if you go all the way with psychedelics, especially DMT and 5-MeO, where you actually break through. But yeah, it was really interesting to see the more visual, trippy side of this substance, which we don't often see. It's more, yeah, like I say, a consciousness enhancer rather than sort of a trippy, out there, altered dimension sort of experience that you can have. Hope you enjoyed this one. I know a lot of you want to read or hear more of the reports that don't go too far deep into like the mystical transcendent realms, but I agree, I want to vary it up a bit more because there's value in every single experience, as I've said. Also, another thing I'll comment on was the fact that this guy was on sertraline. Oh my god, as if I'm recording and the fire alarm just went off. What the fuck? Well, I thought I'd leave that in there for a laugh because that took me by surprise. The house isn't on fire either, I don't believe, so all's good in the hood. But yeah, I was going to say the fact that this guy took sertraline, or sertraline, however you spell it, and SSRI, which is what they prescribe to people with, I believe, depression and other conditions like anxiety. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't actually know much about SSRIs, but I do know that they can actually interfere with the psychedelic experience of many substances out there. Maybe it's different with 5-MeO, maybe it doesn't affect the experiences drastically as it does with, I know, mushrooms. If people take them when they're on antidepressants, it can seriously inhibit the experience and you can really get nothing out of it. And sometimes it can take a bit of a twisted turn, I've read, for some people, where they sort of like working in opposition to each other, because obviously the SSRIs affect serotonin, and a lot of chemicals, say like MDMA, would affect your serotonin receptors, which if you take with antidepressants, you're gonna have a bad time. Or maybe not, it's all just down to the individual, isn't it? Yeah, let us know if you have any experiences of taking psychedelics with antidepressants. Obviously I don't recommend this at all. I'd say if you're gonna be doing it and you do have antidepressants prescribed to you, come off them a few days before you plan your trip so that they don't interfere with them at all. I don't think it's worth the risk, really. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and we'll see you next time.